In the Gospel account of Mark, we had seen back in the first chapter when Jesus began his ministry, and he actually began to call certain men to be disciples or followers of his. We saw he called Peter and Andrew and James and John, who were fishermen, and they began to follow Jesus, and we saw multitudes of people begin following Jesus around, and Jesus casting out demons, performing many miracles, doing a lot of teaching. And we fast forward then to chapter 3. We've seen Jesus already in chapter 2 and chapter 3 being questioned about a lot of things he was saying and doing. But it is in chapter 3 of Mark. In Mark chapter 3, picking up today for this week in verse 13, that Jesus then, it says, he went up on the mountain and called to him those he himself wanted, and they came to him. And so as great multitudes are following Jesus around, and Jesus is gathering a following, maybe some disciples to some extent. Well, we see here in verse 13 that or even in verse 14, that he appoints 12. It says he appointed 12. 12 specific men that he chose, Peter, Andrew, James, and John being four of those special 12, if you will, the chosen 12. They were these 12 men, as we'll see throughout the Gospels. They become his inner circle. They become the ones who are going to be closest to Jesus, at least in proximity and hearing and seeing all that he is doing, even having special explanations given to them. But here it says that Jesus chose these 12 that they might be with him, and so that he might send them out to preach and to have power to heal sicknesses and to cast out demons. And so Jesus, as he was going around preaching and teaching and performing miracles, well, in a way, in a sense, Jesus wanted help. And for various reasons. I think he chose these men to do the things they did for their own, faith and knowledge. But in another way, it was good for Jesus to have help in the preaching and teaching and the miracles. We already see great multitudes swamping Jesus. And so to have, at least at this time, these 12 who can help carry the load, help perform the work needed. They were going to be preaching. They were going to be given power by the Spirit of God to be able to heal sicknesses and cast out demons, just like Jesus was doing. And then beginning in verse 16, we're told who these men were. Simon, to whom Jesus gave the name Peter, which we read about in Matthew's account, that occasion when Jesus gives him that name, talks about that. But Simon, or Peter, as we mostly know him, James, the son of Zebedee, and John, the brother of James. Again, James and John being fishermen with Peter, and then Andrew, the brother of Peter, is going to be one. But James and John, the sons of Zebedee, to whom Jesus gave the name Boanerges. I have no idea how to pronounce that, so excuse me on that. But it is translated, or it means sons of thunder. And if you remember back in Matthew's account, there was an occasion in which we talked about possibly, we're not really sure why Jesus called them sons of thunder. It was either because of their, their abilities and their presence in teaching and, kind of sons of thunder in a good way, that they were, powerful speakers, great presence, or they were called sons of thunder because of that instance as Matthew talks about, in which they wanted to rain fire down upon, those who would not accept Jesus into their city. So at any rate, Jesus calls them sons of thunder. And then Andrew, the brother of Peter, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, James, the son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, Simon the Canaanite. So don't get him and Peter mixed up. So that's why it's good to call Peter Peter, and this Simon the Canaanite. And then Judas Iscariot is mentioned. And the clarification or the description that is often given in the accounts, even when listing the names, even though in Mark's account it hasn't happened yet, obviously, but Mark, writing these things after the fact, tells us that Judas Iscariot, yes, he is the one who also betrayed Jesus. And of course, that'll play out later, and as Mark recalls and recounts all of the events that took place. But it says they went into a house then. But what we see here is Jesus, yes, was gathering a following, disciples, people coming to him. But here he chooses these 12 specific men who would be called to follow, to be disciples, to listen to Jesus, to watch Jesus, to grow in faith. But let's also remember, as we think about their calling, that they still had to make a choice. Would they follow? Would they have faith? Would they believe? Yes, they would be given power and ability and the message to preach and teach. But really what we find as we read through the Gospels is, in a sense, their calling to be disciples and followers of Christ is no different than ours today, in that we got to make a choice. Will we follow? Just for instance, we know that Peter, he had his struggles. He had his great acts of faith. But Peter also had his moments where he chose to betray Jesus, or deny Jesus, rather. Peter had his struggles with his faith. We know Judas Iscariot, he was right there with the other disciples, the apostles. He was right there witnessing, hearing, doing all of these things. But it is Judas who would end up betraying Jesus. And all of these disciples, all of them would be scattered. All of them would be challenged in faith. All of them would have doubts and fears. And so just like they were called by Jesus to follow, they had a choice. We have a choice today. Jesus is calling all of us to be his disciples, to be his followers, to listen and to obey and to become his students. We may not be given today the power to heal sicknesses and cast out demons, but what we do have is that power in events revealed, and the message of the gospel that we should be living and then teaching to others. So as we read about Jesus calling these men to be his disciples, let's hear Jesus calling our name. Let's see Jesus calling out to us through the gospel, calling us to be his disciples and to follow him, to become like him, to be like him, and then to share the gospel with others. Let's continue to grow in our faith and to be disciples of Jesus and to love him, follow him, obey him, become like him, so that we can be with Jesus one day in heaven. God bless.